Hi, Shellye. Welcome to the Beyond Barriers podcast. We are so thrilled and honored to have you here. All of us absolutely loved your book, and we're so excited to share the insights with our audience. So let's dive right in. What inspired you to write this book?
I have tried throughout my career to be accessible.
Mm,
People reach out and I respond. And early in my career, people want to meet, have coffee, pick my brain, et cetera. And I would try to do that. But as I took on more and more responsibility throughout my career, I still respond. I still do. But I couldn't meet with everyone that wanted to meet with me. And I said, you know what? When I get to phase two,
mm,
I'm going to write it down. I'm going to write down the strategies, the techniques, what worked, what didn't. Talk about the fact that life is hard. People don't tell you that. All those things, because it was just killing me that I couldn't do that.
mm-hmm.
I've been fortunate. I've learned from a lot of people throughout my career. A lot of folks have helped me, and I've always wanted to be able to pay that forward.
Thank you so much for writing that book. I know I've been personally very impacted by it and truly inspired by your story. For you, as you wrote and documented your journey, what was most impactful for you in that reflection?
Yeah, it was a very interesting process. It took me like 3 years,
Wow.
and I'll tell you, it was going back and really thinking about what happened and what
Mm,
was the cause and why do I think this way and why do I do that. I was trying to share not just the what to do.
mm-hmm,
There's a lot of books out there that say, take step one, step two, step
mm-hmm,
three, and boom, all this stuff will happen. And I was really trying to share not so much the prescriptive, do this, but through story, share what worked for me and why
mm-hmm,
it worked, and what I learned and why I learned it. And that part was actually, it was hard. I had to think
mm-hmm.
back on a lot of memories, some good, but some not so good. Things
Right,
that you typically try to lock away and not think about again.
right.
So it was actually a challenging process.
Must have been quite a journey of introspection, especially because you go way back into your childhood and trace it all the way through. But there's a through line that comes across that's so powerful and inspiring. And, the idea of being unapologetically ambitious, but also that, ambition alone isn't enough to have those strategies to, achieve the success is so important. So I want to get into one of the paragraphs that you shared about, as a business leader and mentor, you're surprised how many people that are smart and talented and creative don't really have a plan in place to reach their goals. And we certainly see this a lot in our leadership accelerator that helps mid-career women. We've often come across the same challenge: a lot of desire for achievement and ambition, and yet not a clearly defined plan in place. And research has also shown that only 15% of women have clarity on where they want to be in their careers in 5 years. So, what tough love or advice would you give to everyone that's listening right now who doesn't have a plan?
Mm. Well, let me start with an analogy. You would never spend $2,000, $3,000 for an airline ticket. Pack your bags, put your dog in the kennel, put your mail on hold, let your neighbors know you're going to be gone for a while, head to the airport, get on the plane, strap in your seatbelt, and then look at the pilot and say, "So, where are we going anyway?" Right? You would
That's a
never do
great
that.
analogy.
Okay. But listen, we do that with our careers every day. But
Hmm.
it's not two or $3,000. We've spent, if you look at it, hundreds of thousands of dollars. If you look at what you
Yeah.
spent for education, for training, for conferences, for events, for organizations like yours, right, that people get involved in, right? All books. I mean, all these things you've
Hmm.
done to improve and build skills and et cetera. And then we let someone else decide what's going to happen with all that. That's
Right.
crazy. That's crazy. No, be intentional.
Hmm.
And honestly, I think sometimes people just they don't give themselves permission
Mm.
to actually dream, to actually ask themselves, if I could do anything, what would I be doing?
Hmm.
Right? To really put it out there. Because part of it is vulnerability. Because if
Hmm.
you actually decide, oh, I'd really like to do that, then you feel vulnerable. What happens if it doesn't work? What if I fail? I mean, all these issues come to fore that I think
Hmm.
prevent us from actually acting on some of these thoughts or even voicing. People will come to me sometimes for advice and say, you know, I really would like, I'll ask them, well, what do you want to do? Right. And if they know, they'll say, well, I'd like to do X. One day I'd like to run engineering, or I'd like to run a company, et cetera. And I say, great. Who else knows? And they kind of look, well, what do you mean? Well, I mean, who else knows this is what you're trying to do? And so often nobody knows. Maybe a spouse, maybe a boyfriend, a
Mhm.
partner, a family member, but no,
Right.
we need to realize that we are responsible for our careers. We own our careers, not the company,
Hmm.
not your mentor, not your spouse or your partner. I mean, it's you. So take the time. We spend more time planning a vacation than we spend planning our careers, which is nuts.
That is such a great analogy to share and so powerful because you're also investing time and your effort and your energy and everything. But without a plan, you can't hope to get there if you don't know where you're really headed. You also share that success begins with figuring out what you want and then making the choices that will get you there. How would you break down that process that you went through, perhaps, in figuring out what you really wanted, and how could that be instructive to someone who's listening that says, okay, maybe I sort of know my North Star, but I'm not quite sure how to even go down that process of figuring out the step by step.
Mm, you know, to me, it's just been three simple questions. What is it I'm trying to achieve or impact or create, right? So
Mm,
whatever verb fits in. So you use the term North Star. So you
mm,
have your North Star. Okay, that's what you're trying to do. So the second question is, what has to be true
mm,
for that to happen? Now, in order to determine what has to be true, you have to do the work, do the homework. It's the research. It's like, okay, so when I decided at the ripe old age of 16 that I wanted to run a company one day, I had to look to say, okay, who are these CEOs? What were their educational backgrounds? What jobs do they have? What kind of careers? What's their lifestyle like? I mean, it's doing all the research. And then that helps you understand, well, what has to be true? And then
mm-hmm.
the next question is, how do I make it true? And literally, that's what I've done with everything, personal objectives, professional objectives. What is it I want? What has to be true for me to get it or to have it or to create it? And then how do I make it true? And in the how do I make it true? That's the plan. Those are the steps.
Simple yet powerful. That's amazing. I love those questions. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about a story that you shared after you, quote unquote, made it and got a board director role. And you walked into the conference room, and it was painfully obvious that you were the only, and a flash of imposter syndrome surfaced. It's something that most successful people can relate with, that sense of feeling like a fraud, that you don't belong. How has imposter syndrome impacted you?
Oh, I've suffered from imposter syndrome my entire life. My entire life. I'd love to say, oh, I've conquered it. But frankly, no, from time to time, it still raises its, little head on me. The key is not to let it stop you.
Hmm.
It's to learn how to deal with it, right? And one of the things that I've learned over time is just about everybody suffers from imposter syndrome. Studies show women more so than men, but
Mm-hmm.
men still do.
Right.
And then women of color, actually the most.
Mm-hmm.
So, what does that tell you? It tells you that it's not you. What the causes of imposter syndrome, they're like in the air. If it were just you, then you'd be the only one or
Mm-hmm.
one of just a few people. But no, everybody has it. So that's, I like to say, therefore, realize that it's in the air. It's kind of like television. It looks real, sounds real, it can even feel real. I mean, something scary comes on and you start to feel that. And if we have kids or nephews, nieces around and they get scared, what do we say? We say, oh, don't be scared. It's not real. That
Mm-hmm.
imposter syndrome, it's not real. And
Mm-hmm.
what do we do if it gets too scary and we feel like we're immobilized? We turn the thing off, right? You turn off that TV. Well, that little voice that you hear in your head that's telling you, wait till they figure out you don't know as much as they think you know, right? Why do you think you're going to be successful? I mean, that little voice, it's not real. Turn that thing off. I believe it comes about because we live in a world that's so judgmental. So don't take it personally. It is not you. It is the environment in which we are in. So turn that thing off. And if you can't turn it off, and I talk about a few steps in the book in terms of to help you manage through it, but realize that you're typically only feeling it when somebody is offering you something new, a new
Mm.
opportunity to join a new group, to speak, right? It might just something new. It's that something new that strikes up, oh my God, I don't know if I can do this, right? Well, remember, they wouldn't ask you to do it. They wouldn't invite you into the room, right? They wouldn't do any of that if they didn't believe that you can do it.
Mm.
If you can't believe in yourself, believe them. And then if that's still not working and you're still hesitating, oh, I don't know if I should take the job. I don't know if I should add that responsibility, whatever it might be. Fake it. Fake it. Act like you know what you're doing until you do. Because if you
Mhm.
think about it, you always figure it out. Think about it. You
That's
always
correct.
figure it out.
Yeah.
So give yourself the benefit of the doubt, right? And that's what I've done. And trust me, when I say my whole life, one of the stories I share in the book is my first Verizon board meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I'm getting ready to walk into the Verizon board meeting. Now, at this point, I'd been a CEO for a decade. I'd served on public boards for 8 years, roughly. So this wasn't like this was a brand new experience. And I get ready to walk in and I look, and it's like, oh my God, there's the CEO of Walgreens. There's the former Secretary of Transportation. That's the former chairman of the SEC. What makes me think that I'm going to be able to go toe to toe with these people? Do I really belong in this room? Do I? And it's like, Shellye, get over it, right? Come on. That's the benefit of being older. I still have it, but I know it when I see it,
Mm-hmm.
right? And what do? Put those shoulders back, take a deep breath, and walk in and act like I know what I'm doing until I do, because eventually I will.
Hmm.
So, for all of you out there that are hesitating because you have that little voice, don't let that little voice control your life.
Well, what's powerful in what you shared is also you sharing that you still struggle with it. I think that in itself is such a, incredible thing for other people to relate to, because you'd never think that someone as highly accomplished as yourself would still be feeling that. And, that should give everyone hope to say, you know what, it's never stopped you and it shouldn't stop any of us. And we can still keep going and trust that we will overcome those barriers and learn as we go and step into exactly who we're meant to be.
Absolutely. Can I just add a point on this whole learning thing?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, that's really the crux of it.
Mm.
Realize that every time you take a new job, a new role, a new opportunity, etc., you're starting at the bottom of the learning curve ladder,
Mm-hmm.
right? By definition and by design. There's no way you're expected to know everything about the role and be an expert in it when you first get it. Nobody expects that. You don't expect that when you hire people.
Mm-hmm.
So realize that. And
Right.
it's okay to be at that step and to learn and to grow and to climb all the way up, right? Until you jump to the next ladder.
Mm-hmm.
But realize that that discomfort, right? That feeling, that lack of confidence that you suddenly feel, that, oh my God, where am I? How am I going to do this? All those things that come through
Mm-hmm.
is very normal. That sense of discomfort means that you are learning.
Mm.
All right. Your whole career, your whole life should be about learning. The more you learn, the more you grow, the more you're able to contribute. So I would tell you, get comfortable feeling uncomfortable. Because if
Mm-hmm.
you're not, if you're feeling pretty comfortable most of the time, then you're probably coasting. And cars only coast downhill.
Mm.
You need to be uncomfortable at least every 3, 4 weeks, because that says that, okay, I'm learning, I'm adding new things, right? I'm putting myself out
Mm-hmm.
there. So don't worry about this discomfort. Every time you feel it, it's like working muscles. I like to exercise. Well, when you work those muscles, right, and you work them hard, the next day they're kind of sore, right? It's a little
Mm-hmm.
uncomfortable. That means that your muscles are getting stronger. That
Right.
discomfort you are feeling in your body, that means your mind is getting stronger. It is okay.
Mm, very powerful. And especially in a world that's changing so fast, if someone is standing still and coasting, chances are they're actually getting left behind and don't even know it.
That's right.
Learning
Downhill.
is truly the superpower now. So, often this fear of newness, of perhaps fear of failure and imposter syndrome also prevents people from making the right decisions, and taking risks. And as you've noted in the book as well, is it's really important to take risks in order to be successful. Can you share your strategy on how you evaluate and decide which risks are worth taking and which are not, or just how do you go about sort of evaluating risks in general?
It's important to realize that risk and opportunity are two sides of the same coin.
Mm-hmm.
In order to get the best opportunities, you're going to have to take risks. So, how do I think about it? Well, when something comes forward, I ask myself, okay, what's likely to happen? What's the
Mm-hmm.
best that can happen? Right? So you go through and say, okay, what are the upsides? How does this look? And first of all, is that even worth it? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that return worth it? And if it is, then I ask myself, okay, what's the worst that can happen? And can I live with it?
Mm.
And you know what? If you actually define the worst that can happen and write it down, and I literally mean it, write it down. Write it down so you can actually stare at it and look at it. It suddenly becomes tangible. You realize it's actually not that scary, right? It's not that
Mm-hmm.
scary because it's really rare that the worst that can happen will destroy your health. The worst that happen will actually put you out on the street homeless. The worst that can happen will, I mean, if you think about the things that really are fearful,
Mm-hmm.
those probably aren't it. Okay. So
Yeah.
when you realize that the worst that can happen is, well, maybe I get embarrassed.
Yeah.
Okay. You can kind of live with that.
Mm-hmm.
Or the worst that can happen is maybe I actually stumble or fail or I don't get it done.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Is that okay? Well, yeah, well, I've learned, well, I've gotten support, well, I've grown, all those things, then okay, I can live with that too.
Mm-hmm.
So the key is ask yourself, what's the worst that can happen and can I live with it? And it's almost like by staring at it, right, enables you to move farther, faster. It's when we don't define it and it stays as oh, it is scary, the amorphous scary.
Right.
Well, when it's amorphous, you can't deal with it because it's just kind of there and it keeps you from moving forward. So define it, look at it, analyze it, and then you'll find you get more comfortable with it.
Mm. So turn the gray into black and white and then deal with it and take those steps forward. Excellent. Let's shift gears to talking about asking for what you want. I love the story about your career at IBM, where your manager said that there were no management opportunities, and so you just started looking elsewhere. And so many people struggle with that exact scenario because when they're told that there's no opportunities, they still choose to not look anywhere else, even within the same organization, let alone looking outside, and just assume that that is the ultimate boulder in their path and they can't get around it. And you've sort of navigated like a river that finds the path forward. One of the questions we often get is, I know I should be asking for it. I literally don't even know how to. The script of how do I go about vocalizing that? Can you perhaps share an example, or a specific way that someone who's looking for that opportunity could express that very clearly and break it down for them?
Certainly. So first, it's not a one-time conversation.
Okay.
It's important that people know what you want all along the way. And again, risk and opportunity. So you have to take the risk to let them know.
Mm.
So let me tell you how to do it. You can no, I don't recommend walking to somebody's office and saying, okay, one day I want to be whatever, chief marketing officer, right, of this company. So how are we going to make that happen? Okay, nobody wants to work with people like that, right?
Hmm.
Instead, you walk into your boss, right? Again, this is why it has to be multiple conversations. The best way to do it is you walk in, even as you get started, as you get started in the job, or as you've been in the job for 6 months or a year or whatever, you say, one day I aspire, and then give a level that's maybe 2 levels above where you are. Okay. One day I aspire to, who knows, vice president of sales.
Hmm.
Um, okay. Then you say, one day I aspire to be the vice president of sales. Do you think I have the potential?
Hmm.
Now, what have I just done? I just told them what I aspire to. So now they know what I want. But I've done it in a way that is not threatening, right? It's not super aggressive. We have to walk those fine lines. If men can walk through a road, women get one lane. and women of color get that little strip down the middle of the of the road, right? I mean, we have a very narrow bands in which we act as to how people respond. So I'm a Black woman, so I've got that yellow line down the middle, which is very narrow. So what I've learned is to ask for what I want, but do things in a non-threatening way. But it's clear, right? And that's a very simple statement. It's very clear what I want.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what I've done is I've asked for their advice because I've said, you know, one day I aspire to be vice president of sales. Do you think I have the potential? Well, guess what? When you say potential, that's an easy layup.
Mm.
Everybody says yes. Everybody says yes. They're not going to tell you no potential. If they didn't think you had potential, they wouldn't have hired you. Okay. So they're going to say yes. Wonderful. It's like fishing. You now got them. They just bit the hook because you now get to say, wonderful. What advice do you have for me on? And then pick the areas you want to focus on, either experiences that you think I ought to try to gain, more skills that I ought to build, right? Blah, blah, whatever it might be to work toward that.
Mm-hmm.
And now they have to answer because they've told you you have potential. So now they're going to tell you something. It doesn't matter what they tell you.
Mm-hmm.
Take the advice, and then report back. And it doesn't matter if it's a month later, 6 weeks later, or whatever. Say, hey, you suggested that I get experience, blah, 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 blah. Right? Here's what I've done. Is that what you had in mind?
Mm.
Right? Thanks very much. By the way, what? And then you ask the next thing. Okay, so now what's happened? Now that they are giving you advice, you are taking advice, right? You're responding back. They now actually start to feel a little responsible for you because they're guiding you, right? And all of a sudden, they went from a manager to a mentor, and they didn't even know it. All right. So now you can have the conversation about the next steps because you gave an aspiration 2 steps over, right? So that you can talk about, well, what step do you think would be next? All right. And how well am I positioned for that? And what do I, right? Now you can start to have conversations. So now you're building a plan, right? And they're part of this plan.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that's just an example.
That is fantastic, and it's so tangible that anyone can apply. And I love how it's so inclusive in bringing the manager into the conversation, and really making them feel responsible for your success. And same with mentors and sponsors as well, to bring that into it. Love that. Um, I want to get your thoughts on the level of change that's happening in the world, and especially with technology disruption. Staying ahead of the curve, or at least making sure you're aligned with where the world is headed, and what competencies and skills are most in demand. That is key to tapping into that opportunity. And even in your own story, you shared about choosing the technology industry because you can go work against the market, where the demand is, follow that demand. How would you answer this today in today's environment? What do you think is the biggest opportunity or threat that our audience should be preparing for?
From an opportunity standpoint, I still think tech is a great opportunity because every company is becoming a tech company. It's just critical to how companies build and execute on their strategy, serve customers, right? All those things. The threat that exists is if you're a non-learner, because the world is changing so fast that if you're not keeping up with trends, with technology, with changing buyer behavior, you're not going to be effective. So being a constant learner and putting yourself out there, being willing to be vulnerable by doing things that are new, that's where the threat is.
That's with the level of change, it's impossible to know everything. But it is, critical that no matter what your current skills are, they're always looking forward and constantly learning and adapting to what's ahead.
Absolutely.
So, we are now challenged with so many different things to do. It's, sort of do well in the job you have, but look forward and, manage your career, but also prepare for tomorrow. And if the past year has been any indication, the loss of boundaries and the blurring of boundaries with home and life and work, all of that has disproportionately challenged women in particular, right? And the whole idea of work-life balance, which has always been a myth, and you have articulated that. Can you share with us, some of the lessons you've learned about not taking on too much and finding harmony by integrating different aspects of your life? And what advice would you give to our audience around the world, that are really struggling with all of this, especially in this sort of new post-pandemic normal?
So a couple things. So first, the importance of focus. When the
Mm.
world around you is chaos, it really is important to focus. And the analogy that I'd use is actually my 4-year-old grandchildren. One of the things that they love to do is they stand in the middle of the floor and they'll spin and spin and spin until they get dizzy and dizzy. And next thing you know, they're flat on their back, typically giggling. All right. Now contrast that with a dancer. A dancer will get up and spin and spin and spin and spin, stop and move on gracefully.
Mm.
What's the difference? The dancer picks a focal point and whips their head around, right back to the focal point. No matter how fast they're spinning, it's back to that focal point. And that helps them stay in balance, right?
Mm.
Helps them stay straight when chaos is around you. And heck, last year is a perfect example of that. It's really important to pick that focal point. What's really important? Stay focused on that. Let go of the rest so
Mm.
that you can stay on your feet. Now, a key element of that, and this is especially hard for women, is I believe it's really important that we decide individually what we're willing to be judged on.
Mm.
The world will judge us on everything. They will judge us on, yes, how well we do in our career, how professional we are, but they'll also judge us on our homes and our children and our partners. And they'll judge us on how we look and how we act and what we say. And they'll judge us on everything. I used to say, if my husband walked out of the house with a wrinkled shirt, people wouldn't say, gosh, how can he walk out like that? No, they'd say, where's his wife? How could his wife let him out of the house like that? Right? Like, what? Same thing for kids. I mean, we get judged on everything if we accept it. If we
Mm.
accept it. So no, decide what you're willing to be judged on.
Mm.
And an example I'll give, which I do share in the book, is my daughter. My daughter was born with really thick curly hair. And the best way to brush her hair was to brush and braid. Okay, I grew up brushing and braiding hair. My husband, 6'2", former athlete, big hands. Had he ever like braided little girls' hair? No. Did he need to learn? He did, because I couldn't do it all the time and I wasn't going to do it all the time. We're both parents here, right? So when he was learning how to braid little girls' hair, well, she left for preschool looking pretty jacked up at time to time, right? I mean, because parts crooked, a thick braid, a thin braid, right? Not even. All these things you learn when you're first braiding hair.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if I was worried about being judged on that, all right, I would have like been, oh, well, let me redo it. Well, that's not fair. That would demoralize him. He'd say, fine, you do it. I'm not doing this, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't. She went to school looking however he finished. Now, do I know that when she got to school, people said, where's her mother? How could they let her out of the house looking like that? Of course they did. I
Yeah.
didn't care. I didn't care. That wasn't important to me. I refused to be judged on it. What was important for us as a family is that he learned how to do her hair.
Mm.
And he did. After a couple months, he was great. And she looked fabulous. Now, listen, she's 4 years old. She didn't care how she looked during that learning period. 4-year-olds don't care how they look, right? So it wasn't bothering her. One day's picture day, and he happened to do her hair for picture day. Well, he was trying to do 2 braids pinned up like a little crown on her head. By the time picture time came, it wasn't pinned very well. One braid had fallen down, one's on her head, it's unraveling. But here she is. She didn't care. Okay. That picture is still on the wall of my home to this day because it's an example of what's important to us and what we're willing to be judged on and what we're not. Did that impact her? Of course not. She's a well-adjusted, successful woman with 3 children herself, right? And married. So no, it didn't affect her at all. So decide what you're going to be judged on.
Mm-hmm.
Let go of the rest. That's how you have time to focus. And integrating your life, to me, it's all about how can I do multiple things at once? Because time is what's most precious to me, is time. So I formed a gourmet dinner club when I moved to Silicon Valley. Why? Well, I needed to establish my friendship circles. I like to cook. I like to entertain. I enjoy nice wine, right? So I said, all right, let me do it all together. So literally now people come together, we cook, we eat, we drink nice wine, right? We have fun. It's one thing. When my husband and I would go to performing arts when we could pre-COVID, um, it was all about not just us going. We invite 30 friends, right? Yeah, let's make it an event. Now we do dinner, we do the event. Well, guess what? It was still one event, but I got to touch and interact and see multiple people. I do walks and talks at work. If I had a one-on-one and there were no slides, no presentation, let's walk. Why? Because I need exercise. So, figure out how you just integrate different parts of your life together so that you can optimize your time. That's why it's part of why I can't stand the term work-life balance. It's not like, oh, I do this over here, I've got to do this over here. Separate but equal.
Mm-hmm.
We learned a long time ago, separate but equal does not work.
Mm-hmm. Powerful advice. And time is the most precious resource and the great equalizer. So the ones that know how to leverage it well achieve more and fulfill their dreams. So this is very actionable advice. And thank you for sharing that. Speaking of family, one of my favorite stories in the book was just about you and Scotty and just how thoughtfully and intentionally you chose your life partner. And, it's often said that's one of the most important business decisions that anyone will even make in their life. Tell us a little bit about that and also, finding cheerleaders throughout your life and your career.
Yes, it was interesting. Back to what do I want? What has to be true? How do I make it true? Well, when I looked at all the CEOs, they all had back then, this is the early 80s, they all had stay-at-home wives if they were married. And I was like, all right, that means you obviously need a lot of good support, right? And flexibility and whatever. So that went on the list of what I needed in a spouse because I wanted a long-term partnership. I wanted a long-term partner. So therefore, I wanted to find somebody that I loved with all my heart, but that also would be the person who would want to support my career aspirations, right? Be the person who would be willing to be flexible if I wanted to have kids, right? So I had this whole list of, all right, here are the things that I absolutely need in a life partner. So I was intentional. And you know what? I had all those conversations before I got engaged.
Yeah.
Tough conversations don't get easier with time. They get harder, right? It's kind of like raw meat. You know, raw meat in the refrigerator for a day or two is okay. A week, a month, a year? Oh my God, right? Well, that's kind of how tough conversations are. So the earlier you have them, the better. You know, Scotty and I got to know each other and I knew that I was in love and I thought he was going to be asking me to marry him. We talked about everything but one thing. And that one conversation I had to have because I didn't want him asking me to marry him and I didn't know that answer, right? And so I said, Scotty, we've talked about having kids. And he said, yep, I want kids. I said, yep, I want kids. I said, my mom was a stay-at-home mom. I liked that. And given the career aspirations, et cetera, I said, I would really like it if we could have the flexibility where, if needed, one of us would stay home, right, with the kids. And he said, I said, I'd be willing to make the trade-offs and all those kinds of things. And he said, I could see that. My mom worked, but she always was flexible to be able to be home, blah, 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 blah. I said, okay, I just don't want the person that stays home to be me.
That's
Right?
incredibly bold and,
It was, right? Talking about taking a risk.
yeah.
Um, but here's the deal, taking the risk. What's the worst that can happen? The
Mm-hmm.
worst that can happen is he would say, I could never do that.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Well, then I know my answer. And I either walk into the relationship with my eyes wide open, or I decide this may not be the relationship for me. So that's why I asked the question. And he eventually, after thinking about it, right, he was quiet there for a while. He said, I love to work. I've always worked, but I could do that for you. And I said, all right then. And he asked me to marry him 3 weeks later.
That's love. And that was, such an incredibly powerful partnership, and, all of the dreams that were enabled together as a family. It's very powerful and inspiring for everyone out there that has similar ambitions. You need your community and support system around that. Shellye, thank you.
Absolutely.
This has been such a fantastic conversation. And, this was just a glimpse of all the powerful stories and advice you've shared in your books. I want to encourage all of our listeners to go out and get the book and be unapologetically ambitious and chase your dreams. Thank you again for being with us.
Thank you very much for having me. I've enjoyed it.